is no excuse why the three major stations are not doing local programs. It's really appalling. There were a series of conditions, all of which happened around the same time, which brought about the golden age. The first was we had what was called the Massachusetts miracle, when we had an enormous amount of good economic news, particularly because of the high-tech industry on Route 128. So there was lots of money around for everybody, and that meant also the TV stations had a lot of money to spend. So that was one thing. But the other thing, which is equally important, is we had a unique situation in that most stations are owned by large corporations. But during this time, we had an odd situation in which not one, but two local stations were locally owned. Channel 5 got a local license in 1972, and Channel 7 got a local license 10 years later in 1982. And there was a much bigger commitment to serving the community. The FCC has a phrase, they call it programming for the public convenience and necessity, which broadly means public interest. And there's always been a tension between the profit motive and the public interest. And because of these conditions, because of the devotion to the local community and local programming, we had this unique situation, a flowering of programming and news and public affairs. It was very exciting. We had not one or two or three, we had 4 local stations that had local daily talk shows. Shows like the Today Show or Good Morning America. And today, we have none. In news, the news was a very exciting time. Not only do we have investigative units, which we still do today, but we had all sorts of specialty reporters in consumer affairs, in finance, art critics and arts reporters. That's all gone. And it was such an exciting time that the stations are willing to send a lot of their correspondents abroad to cover foreign news. They were competing with the networks. Martha Bradley, who's now a chief correspondent for ABC News, covered the Geneva conference between Gorbachev and Reagan in the 80s. Clark Booth, another Channel 5 reporter, accompanied the Cardinal to Cuba. Dan Ray, another marvelous local reporter, went to Ireland to cover the problems there. It was an extraordinary time. Part of the problem and why the whole golden era died was that the market conditions changed. In the same way as that the Massachusetts miracle, as it's been called, helped bring about the golden age in the 70s and 80s, we had a horrible recession in the early 90s. And it was a national recession, but it was particularly strong in the Boston market because of all the high tech when that went south. How can you crave what you don't know? The thing is, today we have so many other alternatives. Cable came into being, and that's caused the audience levels for the local stations to be much smaller. And there have been all sorts of changes in the marketplace, so that we're in different times. Could it happen again? Who knows? One part of me says, no, the world has changed too much. The other part of me says, I just read that Roseanne was coming back, so everything new is old again. One criticism I have is that I think the stations could be doing a lot more in the way of local programming. One of the many problems we have, we used to have critics, including myself, who were pretty tough on the stations, and all of that is gone now, so there's nobody nudging the stations to do a little bit better. If there, for some wonderful reason, were a return to local ownership, that would be terrific. And if the market conditions got better, actually the stock market is way up. Maybe it is, the time is ripe to do more local programming. But there needs to be a lot of pressure by the public and the media, and there doesn't seem to be that anymore. The difference in the marketplace is represented, I remember last summer, It used to be the stations covered the Boston Pops. This year, nobody covered it. That's sort of the difference. The two most productive stations during that time were WCVB and WBZ, channels 4 and 5. Channel 5 had an innovative show which I was privileged to work on called The Good Day Show. It got syndicated in scores of markets. Channel 5 did a marvelous TV movie called Summer Solstice. They had a contest to see who could come up with an original script that had to do with Boston. None of that stuff is going on today. And that's the kind of innovative programming that was been done. And I think, first of all, the financial conditions were ripe. The commitment to local programming was strong because we had at least 2 stations and one very progressive station that was owned by Westinghouse, otherwise known as Group W. So we had very good models for stations. We also had some visionary leadership. I mentioned before Bob Bennett. He was a very, very committed general manager. I remember when I worked at Channel 5, and he looked at the talk show market, and he noted that the rivals, channels 4 and 7, each had their local talk show. And Bob said, I want us to have a local talk show, and furthermore, I want to beat the bejesus out of them within a year and a half. And that's what brought into play the Good Day Show. And, you know, local program could be catching. When people started seeing Channel 5 doing all this wonderful programming, then Channel 4 chimed in, and then so did Channel 7. I mean, they had a superb art show hosted by a very famous opera singer named Phyllis Curtin. And they did all sorts of exciting segments about the arts. There was so much going on, and it was a privilege to be a TV critic.